honor to moderate this session this morning. My name is Stefan Klingebiel from IDOS, Germany, and we are having a session on a tentative agenda for Track 2 Diplomacy 2026-2027. I think it's a great panel because we will try to bring together a bit those rich discussions from yesterday and this morning. And let me also say this, those insights this morning from northeastern states, that was really quite important additional aspect. And this brings me to one point why I'm really grateful to Professor Sachin Chaturvedi and the entire team and Nicola. You can have conferences, workshops everywhere, but to come here to Nalanda University in Bihar, this is really special. It provides additional insight, so that's really great. So the topics we are covering this morning is we will look at the next couple of months and years ahead to the preparation of a post-2030 agenda. So we will look at narratives, development paradigms. We will look at the process topics which we might find most important, actors who we could address, instruments in this regard, all this. As a moderator, I would love to complain about a long list of panelists, so, but I will follow the example of the students yesterday evening. I think that was great, and this role model of this great student, the moderator, she should sit here in my place. It was 2 minutes sharp and then the alarm clock. I will follow a very similar approach, sharp with alarm clock. Our panelists, each of you have got 4 minutes, maybe 1 bonus minute, but then it's really over. I will make sure you come to an end. For the insights, sorry, I'm one of those insights providers. We have a bit more flexibility, so we will start with Bang. So is he online already? So he will have 7 minutes plus one bonus minute. Yeah, this is a bit the system we follow, because our main intention is to engage with all of you. It should be a discussion bringing together everything. Okay, good morning, Bambang. Really
good morning, Stephen.
Connected with you. You will be the first insight provider. And I was just saying, I'm following here the role model of a great moderator from the students group. So you have got 7 minutes. After 7 minutes, you will hear an alarm clock, and then you need to finish your sentence.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Very good morning, everybody. Let me offer 6 brief reflections on what a practical agenda for Track 2 diplomacy in 2026-2027 could look like. First, we are operating in a world that is more resilient than the headline suggests, but also more fragmented than our institutions are prepared for. So we know that our projected global growth would be around 3.2 to 3.3%, but similar message. The world economy is not collapsing, yet it is growing below what is needed for broad-based development and still facing trade policy headwinds, policy uncertainty, and geopolitical risks. At the same time, the UN SDG report finds that only 35% of SDG right on track or making moderate progress, while 47% progressing too slowly, and 18% even regress from 2015 baseline. So the challenge before us is not just crisis management, it is implementation under fragmentation. Second, I would not describe the current moment simply as erosion of global normative order. It is better understood as a contested systemic rebalancing. We do see strain, trade tension remain elevated, debt vulnerabilities persist, and development finance is tightening. But we also see attempts to renew multilateralism. The Pact for the Future calls for a new beginning in multilateralism. The Global Digital Compact puts equitable data governance and international AI governance on the common agenda. African Union, now permanent member of G20, and fourth international conference on financing development in Sevilla last year, explicitly sought to strengthen developing countries' voice in international financial architecture. Third, the Global South is no longer a residual category in the world economy, it is already a structural force. According to UNCTAD, the Global South accounts more than 40% of global GDP, nearly half of global merchandise trade, and more than half of global foreign direct investment inflow. In 2024, South-South trade reached around $6 trillion, representing 26% of total merchandise trade. This means the central issue is no longer whether the South should be included symbolically. The issue is whether global governance, concessional finance, debt architecture, and standard setting can catch up with South's actual economic weight. Fourth, yet this rebalancing remains incomplete and fragile because financial asymmetries are still severe. We still have high indebtedness, and at the same time, OECD projects further 9 to 17% drop of ODA in 2025 after another decline in 2024, with least developed countries and sub-Saharan Africa likely to be hit hardest. So, power is diffusing faster in trade and production than in finance and institutional voice. That gap is one of the main drivers of distrust in today's international system. Fifth, demography is now reshaping the geography of cooperation. South Asia remains the world's fastest growing region. At the same time, UN also projects that sub-Saharan Africa will contribute more than half of global population increase until 2050, and population expected to be more than 2 billion by 2054. The UN New 2026 Youth highlights that more than half of world youth live in low and lower middle income countries. ADB by 2050 showing that 1 in 4 people in Asia and Pacific will be over 60 or basically aging. So, the future of development cooperation will increasingly depend on how youthful regions connect to capital, skills, job, and technology, while aging regions adapt their growth model and social system. 6. Human flourishing, youth futures, and digital system must therefore move from the margins to the center of diplomacy. UN Human Development Report warns that human development progress is slowing to 35 years low, and inequality between low SDI and very high SDI countries has widened for 4th consecutive year. While ETU estimates that 6 billion people, 74% of world population, will be online in 2025, but 2.2 billion people still offline. Internet use in low-income countries is still only 23%. Among the youth, global internet use is 82%, but the gap with the rest of population is widest in low-income countries. And then, what then should Track 2 diplomacy do in 2026-2027? First, it should protect minimum cooperation on shared vulnerabilities like debt, food, climate, public health, cyber stability, and digital governance. Second, it should help build interoperable rather than siloed approach to data and AI governance. Both the Global Digital Compact and OECD stress the importance of responsible and interoperable data governance, while OECD notes that cross-border data flows are now critical to global economic and social interaction. Third, it should connect long-term regional vision to practical coalition. ASEAN 2045, African Union Agenda 2063, and other national long horizon strategies should not remain declaratory texts, but become platform for policy learning and coordinated implementation. Fourth, Track 2 should bring universities, think tanks, youth networks, and science diplomacy much more deliberately into problem solving. The UN has explicitly noted that cross-national scientific collaboration can support Track 2 diplomacy, while the World Bank's Knowledge Compact emphasizes building knowledge network with governments, academia, private sector, civil society, including in the Global South. So, to close my remark, the real question is not whether the world will return to an earlier and more centralized form of order. It will not. The real question is whether we can build enough trust, interoperability, and practical cooperation to govern a more plural world. This is precisely where can add value, not by replacing formal diplomacy, but widening space for trust building, policy incubation, and coalition formation around common development goal. This is an inference from the evidence I just cited. Economic power is diffusing, demographic pressure is shifting, digital interdependence is deepening, and formal institutions alone are struggling to keep pace. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bambang. This was really perfect, not just in respecting the time frame. This is, of course, something very special, but especially the content. I think you highlighted a number of very important challenges for the post-2030 agenda. This is great. I didn't introduce you properly. You are Dean and CEO at the Asian Development Institute in Tokyo. Sorry for this, and we would love to have you here, but please stay online. I'm sure we will get back to your insights.
Okay.
Thank you. Please prepare my slides, and I ask my kind neighbor to be the timekeeper. So no tolerance with the moderator. Yeah, no tolerance. But start when the PowerPoint is ready, not before. So I'm addressing slightly different topics, and colleagues prepare my slides, I'm sure. So my slides are a bit different, not so much on most important topics, but this kind of new political context we are living in, and I think several colleagues addressed it already this morning and yesterday, but I will try to break it a bit further down to talk about those topics which are typically a bit tricky and sensitive, but I like tricky and sensitive topics. And I'm sure colleagues will have the PowerPoint ready in a second. You can already think about your comments and questions and remarks later on, what might be helpful to think about what this group, what track 2 approaches can do in order to prepare for the upcoming discussions ahead to a 2030 agenda. Okay. That's great. Okay, so my 7 minutes starts. So let me start by saying a very fundamental question: are we going to have a new consensus on global sustainable development? You see on the left-hand side a picture from the Paris Agreement, climate agreement in 2015, the same year of the Agenda 2030. It was a window of opportunity because of a specific constellation of political leaders, etc. On the right-hand side, you might remember during the last UN General Assembly, Donald Trump arrived at the UN headquarters, and the only thing he got at the UN was a non-functional escalator, and that's a bit a symbol where we are. And here at the bottom you see we have several statements over the last couple of months from the US administration, where the US administration is explicitly saying that the Agenda 2030 and its SDGs are against national interests of the United States, because this is about soft global governance. And we all understand the United States is not the only country in the world, but they have some kind of impact. So this is my start. This leads me to my second point. Just looking at a number of international debates, I think many observers from the UN Secretary General, many others are just saying we have really a crisis situation. looking at, you know, this kind of competing board of peace, look at what Rubio was saying, and at the Munich Security Conference, many see this as a symbol, as an indication for crisis. And crisis might have a number of different dimensions, just to indicate it here, from legitimacy, looking at WTO and others. We have power shift, looking at new institutions like the BRICS Bank. We have normative fragmentation. We have institutional gridlock. We have proliferation of global governance platforms. But my main message here is this kind of crisis situation, seen from a European perspective, also probably seen from Australian perspective, etc., is very often not seen as a crisis, but as an opportunity. When I'm engaging with colleagues from countries from the global south, they are saying, what we had in the past was a very unfair global governance system, and this is now providing a window of opportunity for change. So I just want to flex this kind of perception is something what is also very relevant for the upcoming discussions on 2030 agenda. Trump is not everything, but Trump is very important in this regard. I would love to talk about 2 hours about the approach when it comes to Trump and international organizations and how to destroy United Nations. All this, just flagging that this was not the starting point of this kind of situation we are in, but he's really speeding up this kind of symptoms we had already. What we saw already before Trump came into the White House for a second time, that we had other main contributions to a shifting geopolitical context. So one, of course, is China's more pronounced role in global governance, just looking at all those global initiatives, including the Global Governance Initiative, which was launched on September 1st. We have in total what is quite often seen as the rise of the global south beyond China, of course India's role, but G77 as the most important platform. Just to highlight few more frustration over a lack of global governance reforms. I think this is something what is quite striking when it comes to a number of global south on governance. One last point I want to select here is this kind of democratic recession is something what is relevant for the global north, but also for the global south. This graph is just the share of population in the global south governed by non-democratic leaders. So the democratic are green. So we have really this kind of sharp decline. And this has an impact also on global governance. This will also have an impact on the situation, how we are discussing the 2030 agenda. Just look at the situation in countries like Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and others. This brings me to my fourth point, and I take it from US colleague Susanne Nössels. She drafted 3 scenarios recently in January. And I think this is summarizing in a quite good way how we could look at the future of multilateralism, but also what does it mean for this post-2030 agenda. Zombie multilateralism, I like the term because it's you can easily remember it, but what it means is we might continue with institutions, multilateral institutions, but they are empty in a way. They are not alive. It's not about values. It's just about a function. You meet for the UN General Assembly. You meet for the Security Council. You meet for all those meetings, but main drivers of those processes do not really have this kind of intention to make it a lively thing. We will most likely see a more China-centric multilateral system. There's not so much to complain about it. This is already reality. The question is rather, are we going to see especially a UN system, which is, I think the UN system was a Western-dominated system for quite a while. Are we going to see a new dominance in this regard? regard, and I think we have a number of closed-door discussions in this regard. A last thing is, and that's a bit Kani and others, are we going to see a rise of the rest? That global southern countries, middle powers, what Kani was saying in Davos, is this something what is creating a new coalition of countries which might be very powerful? This brings me to my last slide. What does it mean for the specific discussion of this session here today? I think to have a continued dialogue on global sustainable development goals is in a way a no-brainer, but nowadays to talk about it with this kind of knowledge that we have a US administration really fighting this, that maybe even European leaders might not want to speak up for a topic which is not seen as the most important one, but you know that Trump might be, you know, Melania was not nice to him this morning, and then he is going to push Macron or Merz because they are saying Agenda 2030 is important. Yeah? So we need some kind of coalition building of like-minded actors, and this is not something what is easy to achieve. It might include mixed alliances, and I would love to see more mixed coalitions between actors from the global south and the north. So why not to make this coalition, this alliance between India, other countries, and some European countries more powerful? I think on paper we have it already, but it's not reality. It should be also about regions. I think we will see a rise of regional governance structures. Last 30 seconds. Also issue-based. This brings me to one other aspect. With some colleagues, I'm working currently on pockets of effectiveness when it comes to multilateralism. When you are looking at the Sevilla conference for global sustainable finance from last year, you find some small steps of improvement, what I would call pockets of effectiveness. So we still have it, but we need to scale it up, and that's not really easy. My last point, and I think we also wanted to discuss it here during the workshop, what was labeled as foresight. Maybe I wouldn't call it foresight, but rather scenario building. I think in this kind of new environment, we need to anticipate what could come next, because what we see today is beyond the worst case scenarios we had before Trump was returning to the White House. So this kind of scenario building, especially for track 2 diplomacy, might be something what is really helpful. And this is what I wanted to say, and I hope I was not too tolerant with my own time budget. Okay, thank you. This brings us to a quite long list of commenters, and I would love to start with our 2 online commenters, and I'm looking here at the support stuff. If Ariane Costa is already online for her 4 minutes. No one. Okay, so we might have a good situation that we can save some time. So the same goes for Sarang, right? Sarang is not online. Okay, even, no, really a pity we miss his intervention, but for the time. So let's continue with Satish. Satish, yes, there you are. So you got those guidance at the beginning, 4 minutes, then the alarm clock will ring and you need to come to an end.
Yeah,
Over to you.
In the OECD, we used to have a hammer which used to come and hit you if you went too far. I have a number of points to make which are, I think, relevant to this agenda. A bit of background, which is simply that in this new evolving multipolar world, we shouldn't make the mistake of assuming that it will only be a duopolar world. So we're not simply talking about the US and China. It's in the process of evolving, and we don't know whether we will have 4 or 5 or 6 different kind of poles, but the picture is not very clear. My first point that I want to make is that when we are talking about the Global South and its dynamics and so on, one of the things we need to do very urgently, particularly in the context of the Indonesian experience, but many others to come, is we need a proper theory of large-scale transformations. At the moment, our approach is either to economic or purely from a political policy level, but one of the things that we learned in Indonesia is that the scale of the transformation affects every single aspect of life. So just to give you a quick rundown of Indonesia, it started a completely new democracy, which means constitutional changes and so on. Military reform, after 40 years, military went back to the barracks. Reform in the judicial system, reform in its social interactions, including internal migration, reform in its major economic institutions, the central bank, the State Audit Commission, and above all, reform in its system of governance as far as decentralization is concerned. So doing all of this at the same time and in the middle of Indonesia's deepest economic crisis means that you do need to have a much clearer understanding of how all these different bits fit together and what is the sequence in which you might want to approach them, or do you approach them simultaneously, and so on and so on. And we don't have a very good understanding because our ability to predict such crises is pretty poor, and where there have been such crises, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the USSR is a clear case, and the case of voucher privatization shows that we only have a peripheral inkling of how to find solutions for this, and we don't have many good textbooks precisely because such transformations only occur once in a lifetime. But they are very important, especially when they take place in large countries like Indonesia. So that's my first point. My second point is that without these textbooks, Indonesia has managed to do things which you would think as being too good to be true. The first of all, in a matter of 20-odd years, is actually embedded in democracy in which nobody believes that there will be a military coup, which coming after 40 years of military rule is a remarkable achievement. The second thing is that it has maintained religious tolerance in a world where it's been racked by religious intolerance and conflict and so on. The third thing is that its defense expenditure GDP ratio is 0.8%. So it's not the case that, even coming out of military rule and so on, it's still maintaining a high defense expenditure. There are lots of reasons for this, but the fact is that you cannot say that somehow expenditure has been diverted to defense away from other things. So that's another issue. The final thing is that it has actually got high economic growth. It's been growing between 5 and 5.5%. Through tsunami, through global downturns, and so on and so on. So it's a remarkable achievement in 22 years of a complete transformation, and we do not have any good case studies of how that happened and what to learn from it. And I think when we're looking at understanding the Global South, the first step is to understand each other, and I think it's time come to do that. My last point, just 1 minute, is that one of the things that we can begin with is to try and look at the relationship between India and Indonesia as a way of another learning mechanism of two democracies with large populations, but who have, one has taken a lot longer and the other one has gone through a dramatic collapse. And so these are excellent case studies. We set up Arthashastra to help you understand these better and to work with us, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was really rich, and I think those experiences from Indonesia are really very insightful, and also to learn about how to improve relationship, how to deepen the relationship between India and Indonesia. I think it's a very, very valid point. This brings us to the next commenter, and let me just say how brave the students yesterday were. They had 2 minutes. And they were able to bring over a number of good messages. So the next speaker is Tetsushi. Is he around? Sorry. How can I overlook you? So your 4 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stefan. So some people in this room, plus Bamban online, have been talking about global think tank cooperation for at least 4 years. So, because of the new people, I'd like to explain what we have meant the global think tank cooperation. There are two important tasks. Number one is really the dialogue and the conversation about policies, better policies, how to navigate politicians and how to better inform the government about good policies. Because important policy, challenges are now the global externalities and global public goods. So, each think tank in each country has a lot of knowledge and information about their own countries, but we need to communicate each other across borders. So this is the number one issue. But second very important task is track to diplomacy. Okay? And then this is, in this case, we are thinking of the situation in which only a few countries become able to communicate deeply, and then because of the lots of conflict. So fewer and fewer countries can have fewer and fewer remaining channels of real communication. Then that would be done by the think tanks. Government cannot talk directly. Then the think tanks will be the very, very valuable remaining channels of the real dialogue and conversation. So, but to serve as a attractive diplomat, think tanks know each other, and then have to know who are reliable, and then to whom you can really reveal the secret, right? So for that purpose, we have to convene these kind of meetings frequently as possible, and then talk about the variety of issues from the every time, and then we know who are the trustable. So then we can serve as a good attractive diplomats. Okay. So this is the purpose of the global think tank. So for that purpose, we should convene as frequently as possible. So T20, the Global Solution Summit, and Climate COP, every possibility. And also G7 has T7. And then T7 is not only for the G7 countries, but open and inclusive to all the think tanks and the university across the world. So we will take all the possible chances, and not always everybody can come, but some, and then sometimes overlaps. So then we will keep the good network. So this is a kind of architecture. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really great. I think this kind of track to diplomacy we need also to deepen it during the discussion. I think beyond, let's say, how often we can meet, we should also think about how to improve the quality of those meetings, that those outcomes have even more impact.
You are right. If it's boring, the people wouldn't come. So
yeah. But this is different here. Yeah. So over to you, Malgor Zata. My pronunciation was very poor, right?
It was very good.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, so good morning, namaskar.
I come from Poland, from University of Warsaw, and Poland is often described as one of the economic success stories of post-1989 Europe. Our GDP actually has grown several times since early 90s, and today our economy is the fastest growing economy in European Union, the fastest growing economy. And yet something interesting is happening, and I would like to talk about it briefly. Many young people from countries like mine, with relatively high GDP and economic stability, travel to India, travel to Nepal, and other countries in South Asia, looking for something our economies do not easily provide. They come searching for well-being, a term that was used here on this forum several times, maybe more than the GDP. And I think that this is significant because it suggests that development debates are slightly shifting from how much we grow to how well we live. I think my academic career reflects also that shift. I'm trained in strategic management, corporate governance, and international business, and used to teach that and do the research in this area for the last 10 years. I'm also a yoga teacher trainer, trained here in India in Rishikesh. And I'm right now incorporating my knowledge I gained here into my leadership courses in Poland. And students, I must say, they really enjoy that. Speaking here as someone slightly outside of the bubble, I would like to offer a very simple observation for this panel. But first, let's do a simple exercise/experiment. For a moment, take a deep breath in and out and remind yourself being student. Remind what were your dreams, your values. Maybe you were kind of rebellious, wanted to do things in a bit different way than previous generations. I think for sure you were, because you all made outstanding careers and are professionals with a lot of power and influence. You all did not want at that time any zombie multilateralism Stephen mentioned. So yesterday, what I'm referring to, yesterday students, they had a debate. And when asked for honest opinion, one brave student said, "Include us at the table." So let's include them as participants in shaping the conversation. Because I think this reflects something we see globally. Generation Z is becoming politically active in many regions. Professor Achut Wagle yesterday mentioned the youth protests in Nepal, and we see how strongly younger generations want to influence political and social change. And yet, if we look at many international forums, I'm concluding, young voices are still not there. Let's then sit together at the table. Another moment that will also stay with me from this forum is Professor Shashmika Ravi. When she was mentioning in her opening speech, she gave a powerful reflection on the role of women in shaping development. And it made me look around the room at Women's Day. So, to conclude, we are talking about the future and the next steps. Nalanda University has long been the place where knowledge, reflection, and mindfulness shaped human flourishing, reminding us that development must go beyond growth to well-being, to include well-being. If we widen the circle of voices shaping the conversation across the generations, cultures, and experiences, I think we take the first real step towards the future of global cooperation. I will be very happy to contribute to this journey and collaboration with Nalanda University and all the institutions you all distinguished guests are representing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really important points, and this remark on you're somebody slightly outside of the bubble. Maybe inside of the bubble we should think about a bubble approach, because a bubble approach is typically not something what is positive. So this kind of observation, there is a bubble, is already a statement, I would say. Yeah. This brings me to my colleague André. André, your 4 minutes starts. You love this approach, I know it.
Thank you, Stefan. In my 4 minutes, I will address the issue of Track 2 diplomacy. As you know, Track 2 is a relatively recent process. The one relating to BRICS emerged in 2010, even before the one that relates to the G20, the so-called T20, which I think was created in 2012 in Mexico. But then the format we work with nowadays comes from Germany in 2017 with task forces and policy briefs and the like. As was also alluded to, we have the T7, Professor Sonobe mentioned, which is, I think, even more recent than the other two. The idea of creating a Track 2 diplomacy, so to speak, was to make international relations and foreign policies more inclusive, and to create channels for inputs from researchers, from academia, universities, and think tanks. And in my view, there are two main comparative advantages that researchers, think tanks, academia might bring to the table and to the decision-making processes. First, the Track 2 diplomacy allows for open brainstorming, risk-taking, and identifying solutions that might be too politically sensitive for government officials to address in a more formal setting. And so that's a big advantage, and it implies that we should strive to achieve honest exchanges in the T20, in the BRICS think tank council, in the T7, and in other Track 2 processes. And second, the second comparative advantage of this process is, in my view, that we have a channel to present evidence and research-based policy solutions or advices to international problems, right? That's, I think, the difference we can make in these processes. However, I must also say, as someone who has participated in most of the editions of the BRICS Academic Forum, I think I only lost 2 since it was inaugurated, and in several of the T20 as well. The BRICS in particular has been quite frustrating because they have not explored these comparative advantages. So I went to the trouble of comparing the outcome documents of the BRICS Academic Forum with the official outcome documents of governments in the governmental summits. And mind you, the Academic Forum is even more conservative than the official outcome document in many ways. It tends to be vague, it tends to avoid difficult issues, and very little in terms of concrete propositions. It also does not focus much on research, as I think it should. Research plays a marginal role in these forums, and so the forums end up acting as channels to reverberate, if you will, the position of national governments. And I don't think that should be its main role. I understand that think tanks have to follow the priorities and orientations of their governments, especially governmental think tanks like my own, but they should try to focus on these comparative advantages that they have and not try to act as diplomats. I think T20 certainly does a better job than the BTTC. Like I said, it focuses on issuing policy briefs, and there's more interaction. And now, in the latest editions, we had innovations as well in terms of group discussions and the like. I was going to give concrete examples of what I think we can do, but clearly my time is up. So
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, well, just from my own work, something we have been discussing a long time, development metrics, right? And particularly with regard to South-South cooperation. There has been none. Countries disagree. Countries have plural practices of South-South cooperation. We have come up with such a common metric in the ambit of UNCTAD. As it is now, it's by and large a Latin American initiative, but it is meant to be global. And we'd be very interested in discussing with Indian and Chinese counterparts how to get them in the process and their views to improving that metric and to have a metric that's truly inclusive and does justice to what is done on the ground in terms of the South-South cooperation. I think that's useful in light of the fact that we say South-South cooperation is distinct from ODA, from North-South cooperation, therefore should have its own metric.
Sorry,
but again, that's an area where I think think tanks can provide very valuable inputs. And I finish here. Thank you, Stefan, for your talents.
Thank you so much, Andre. I think it's really important that you provided the case why Track 2 has a lot of potential and sometimes also using this potential, but sometimes mirroring what governments are discussing, and then it's not any longer value added. Yeah, that's relevant. Thank you. I have 3 more commenters on my list before we open the debate, just to mention it. So it's Veselin is next, then it would be Christian, then it would be Nicola, right? Because we bring those discussions together. And may I already invite Professor Li to some extent, because you had, for spontaneous responses, because yesterday you were a bit under pressure to finalize, and I think many of us were eager to listen to you if you have additional thoughts. But no pressure, yeah, take your time. Good. Veselin, over to you, 4 minutes.
Ich befolge mein Kapitän. I never studied German, but in the army I served, my captain used to be a German, and we responded in that way. 4 minutes, 4 minutes. Track 2, you usually call track 1.5, because we have to include policymakers. And I used to work in all capacities. I was a governmental official, as a diplomat for my country. I was also part of NGOs, human rights organizations, later defending human rights. And in academic sense also, I kind of belong to track 2. And currently, in addition to my professorship in Jindal, I also am part of several groups, networks, associations, and let me quickly list those in the remaining 3.5 minutes. The Global Governance Innovation Network, something Nicola probably knows very well, with Stimson Center and many other organizations, very much behind the Pact for the Future. The meeting in Nairobi was very successful with over 200 organizations, mostly looking at how the United Nations, as the only global organization, should take the challenges we are talking about. And then part of that project, we did something called the Second Charter. This is basically an article-by-article revision of the current United Nations Charter. It's a little bit idealistic, very much long-term looking, but still we wanted to have a text, and the group is called Global Governance Forum, led by Augusto Lopez Claros, that define the next UN Charter. It could be a new organization if this one collapses, but we need to have a text for the member states to start looking at how the future ideal charter of the organization will look like. Happy to go into details for those who are interested and share the document. And then I'm also part of the Academic Council of United Nations system. This is purely academic, but also very much related to campaigners, to NGOs, and to other civil society organizations. The next meeting is in Lisbon with Richard. I'm one of the co-chairs there. And the meeting is 1st to 3rd July, presenting papers over 3 days in Lisbon. So again, it's a very open organization. Anybody can join, not only academics, although it's called Academic Council of UN System. And the topic is the multilateralism and the challenge, which obviously is the issue of this period we are looking at. And the last one, I'm also, virtually yesterday, I was invited in something in Japan, Sonobe Sensei. It's called the Global Peace Building Association of Japan. I still need to figure out what it does. I participated several times, and it is a very much former United Nations officials, also very much like-minded, reform-oriented, and they are also very important lobby when it comes to one of the major future powers, which is Japan, in addition to India, Brazil, and other. I see that as very much Global South influence process, and that's where the world is today. And I would like to see a global coalition where the Global South leads, and the European, Canadian, Japanese, South Koreans, Australian also are part of that, but without the Western voice first. So for me, the change will happen when the Global South take that lead. And I'm very much encouraging everywhere I speak, in Japan, in Brazil, in India, and everywhere else. Africa is very important here because this is where the future of development will lie. Not in China anymore, because China is reducing its numbers. It will be the Global South. And we see very much in terms of development a global consensus. So it's an issue of implementation, how to facilitate and how to finance implementation mostly. It's not so much conceptual development, although we did a lot of work. I published several books on development. The most recent one's called Fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals, co-edited with Nalanda Kakar from New York. But it is the issue of financing and facilitating development. And that's where the push of the track to diplomacy should be mostly oriented at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veselin. Really crucial aspects, including this kind of, we are in need of a coalition which is coming from the Global South, and then northern countries can later on join. I think this is a very important one. I think Latin America could lead a bit on this. I mean, Uruguay is taking over the G77. That would be great. We might see a general secretary for the United Nations from Latin America if the big powers allow this kind of situation, to put it this way. But this kind of coalition, I think that would be a quite concrete topic also for our discussion here today. So let's turn to Christian, who can also bring in his own experiences during his time in government, but also his Global Solutions Initiative hat he is wearing for quite a while now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. I think we are at a really very decisive point in time, and I think what has happened all around, say, the diplomatic exchange shows that we are, and a lot of you mentioned that today and also yesterday, that we are really in a very critical situation. And I think we have probably not so much time really to try to stem us against the wind. And the wind is more and more for fragmentation, for egoistic proposals on policy terms, not looking about what's happening in the neighborhood, thinking about a global role, a higher global role, and I think in the end it will we will still end up with a need that we can only do it together. And this is why I also think that the track 2 diplomacy, and this is also how I see it, and I also did it in my former position at the Federal Ministry of Finance, that this is very, very valuable. So whenever we had discussions, say with critical partners in the globe, I think it will always be done in a small format, in a nice frame, and where we really tried only to talk about where we can agree on and not where the differences are. And from my understanding and from my experience, we can clearly see that these formats do very well, and this is why I'm so happy to be here and discuss it all with you. So I think, of course, every country, every political system is somehow different. It's very individual, and therefore we really have to look how we can tailor that. And I think it's sometimes not easy to create the so-called coalitions of the willing or flexible geometries, but if we really talk about it, if we really do it in small circles, as we do it here, with an academic background, but also with a political background, also with a business background, and also including young people especially, and having also this all possibilities of flexible geometries, I think this works very well. It's especially necessary, of course, for the South-North dialogue, and we have talked about a very imperfect global governing system, which is even now getting more under stress due to unilateral decisions of the big powers. So I think it's now really ready to bring these talks about joint solutions, about agreement, about things where we can agree on some issue. And I think, as said, also with academic support in the track 2 diplomacy, I think there's a lot of possibilities, and I am really happy to be here and discuss it also in an informal setting here. And let's make it workable. And we have our Global Solutions Summit at the 1st and 2nd of June. I think this is a traditional thing. I hope I will see quite a lot of you, and I have just said that we will keep this new summit, especially we try to trigger it in the direction that there is space for really discussions in small circles where really people can get together, also including maybe people from the US and other critical partners. But we have a very good experience of that, and you are all welcome.
Thank you, Christian. Great. So that's a good stepping stone to have Global Solutions Summit early June. That's a great bridge to continue this kind of discussion. Yeah, and I think we can agree with many more of your points. So this brings us to Nicola.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. So I would like to insist on a few paradoxes of the exercise that we are trying to achieve. And basically what we are trying to do is maneuver under constraints and opposite directions. But it's possible to move on. We have some proof that it works. When Dean Sonobe and Dean Bang Bang were referring to the Global Think Tanks Cooperation Format, there were all sorts of reasons for it not to work, but it worked. For this, and I would, with Stefan, that's for the sake of discussion, not just for the sake of disagreeing. I don't think we need like-minded coalitions. We need to be able to speak from different point of views across different like-minded coalitions, which is a very different exercise. And so far, probably under constraint, one problem of Western approach in the changing global context has been to constantly promote an approach of like-minded coalitions, and not to be able, gradually to be less and less able to grasp interesting ideas from non-like-minded coalitions. And I recognize that when it comes to security issues, for example, we are not talking about secondary issues. However, what was also mentioned here, this space of track 2, 1.5 diplomacy, which also is emerging as a trend now, it's a hype, right? So we must take care about that. But this space, we don't have to solve all the issues, right? We have to be able to address them and to be able to understand how to channel some conclusions to governments and other bodies. Then another paradox or contradiction that is to operate this track to diplomacy, we need both very fine-tuning. You need to understand in rather a deep manner like inter-individual exchanges, but also any cultural background or socio-economic background, and we know that there are different layers. And that requires a lot of pre-existing sets of knowledge, which themselves have to be adapted to changing conditions. That is the one hand. And on the other hand, we must also acknowledge that whomever we are, these resemble kind of very humble artisanal craftsmanship, right? We are not processing here industrial byproducts that can be then multiplied in a chain manner. We are not consultants. We are hands-on a number of issues that we understand are important because nurture from evidence, nurture from different statistical sources, and others. And a third kind of paradox that we have constantly to address, we need to be aware of existing sets of literature, what was produced, and the mainstream, and so, etc. And on the one hand, we need to be very open, not just to new ideas coming in from outside, but to the way that creating coalitions or groupings or moments, I would say, moments of more intense interaction can also lead up to formulate new proposals, new ideas. Having said that, we have not done much, right? Because once you say, oh, that's a great idea, then what? Right? And here comes also probably the most difficult part of it, because, and Stefan, you have highlighted here also very, very nicely, by thinking about ways to operate. So you mentioned this notion of modular approach or pockets of effectiveness to be scaled up, etc. In any case, the way to operate, we need to build it. There is a kind of coalition. There are sets of issues. For example, in the global think tanks cooperation, this sustainability debt nexus was identified. We could operate upon it. One question that I'm addressing us collectively here, also for the sake of the discussion in the aftermath, is what in the framework of the Nalanda Development Dialogue we can realistically plan to achieve or deliver or move forward. I will stop here by just adding, Stefan, very, very briefly, one aspect which Dean Bang Bang has highlighted in his presentation. And by the way, he has written a full text that will be distributed to all of you because it's very nicely written, is this notion of trust and this notion of interoperability. We cannot operate, we cannot share good ideas, we cannot, I would say, disagree without a fundamental parameter which is about trust. If there is distrust, then forget about it. We are bound to sort of be very cautious and, you know, put on the table a little bit what is already commonplace, so no harm and no risk. But we are not here to take risks either, right? And these notions of what can be interoperable among completely different sets of systems, including knowledge approaches, etc., I think is something that we really need to be able to pay attention to. Interoperability, new ideas, ways to operate, then opens up to very, very potential new directions, which are not there yet. For instance, here, our discussion, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and how to drive it to other directions. And then Professor Lilly yesterday in her intervention made compelling sets of cases about agriculture, which we can also reuse as part of the follow-up of the discussions, etc. I will stop here for the moment. And just, Stefan, we had also Shuva here, who was a potential speaker, since we had to update on several times the session frame. I would like to, under your guidance, ask Shuva to share a few comments, then Professor Lilly and the others. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Great, and I'm especially grateful for your disagreement, because disagreement is typically the most productive way for discussions. Yeah, and sorry because I was using this, but I understand there are always updates. So great, you are also contributing as a commenter. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Namaskar. Pleasure to be here. I'm Shubha Raha. I head international cooperation at a Made in India think tank called the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. And it's interesting to come after everybody has spoken, because I want to do a little bit of a summary. But before I do that, I would like to go back to a basic question of what is Track 2 and how many people in the world even know what this is. And a lot of solutions that we're proposing are higher level solutions that go beyond sort of making it a public process that a Track 2 technically is. So one of the most interesting challenges I have in my life is to explain to my mother what is my day job, because she doesn't understand what is a Track 2. And that means the public don't know it. And for a process that draws strength from public and civil society, this is a fairly large gap. Now, Track 2 is everything that Track 1 and 1.5 are not. One of the questions that came is that it's a relatively recent process, a formal process. My question is that really true? I mean, why has the consultative process that we followed over millennia fallen through in the modern era? And one of the reasons for that would be the huge division between the administrative authority, who must govern and are accountable, and those who are considered not accountable to the elected polity. And so therefore, the freedom to think outside accountability is no longer seen in a positive light, which is why the question of distrust that we're saying between those who administer policy and those who are thinking aloud is increasing by the day, because we're going on tightening the grip on administrative authority, which is not a bad thing, because we follow the political systems where people are elected, and there has to be accountability for that. The informal lack of dialogue and discussion to a large part is also coming from the social media attitude of gotcha moments, where everything has been reduced in terms of characters, everybody has to win at all costs, and therefore the friction or debate is seen more as adversarial rather than a conversation point. So this brings me to the five main issues that I see with Track 2s now that I'm a part of it circumstantially. I'm not an academic that has, or a politician that has come into this field. I've accidentally stumbled into this field. And the main issues that I see are priorities, trust, interconnections, access, and agency. And very quickly, I'm going to read through because I know there's a time limit. Priorities are the immediate and near-term priorities, mainly what administrations work on, versus maintaining long-term relationships and vision-setting exercises. Different stakeholder groups have different and often micro-priorities. These may or may not be in conflict. There's also a time and space continuum where the same priorities can happen at different points of time and in different circumstances. So we are assuming everything has to happen to everybody at the same time, which is not correct. All-encompassing negotiation documents are another problem because they grab headlines. So the common basics feel inadequate when big bang outcomes are not achieved, because that's the way it's drummed up. And then there's, of course, the challenge of incremental gains versus transformative change, which is the need for sustained, unglamorous system-level changes. I think Dean Sonobe, Professor Sonobe called them boring, but we often undervalue these in our pursuit for big bang change and huge wins, as we call them. There's also a need, and I see that even in the think tank community, to do rather than think. So the value of thought, reflection, debate, discussion is increasingly going down even in the think tank community. And the need to win is creating hardline positions that is reducing further scope for negotiation. So very quickly, the trust, the new paradigm, we have, of course, gone beyond mass consensus at this point of time in multilateralism, which assumes one size fits all. But like Nicholas said, I think we're even going beyond like-minded to strategic partnerships and coalitions. our Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said last week that we need to move beyond the mental block of requiring shared values to build partnerships. It's an interesting, provocative statement. It says that while shared values are important, they are not sufficient to build lasting cooperation and pragmatic cooperation that nations can compete in one domain while cooperating in another. We have trust between government and civil society, trust between civil society and then industry. We have to be able to build interconnections and interoperability, we've spoken about this, between sectors, countries, data systems, gaps in policymaking due to siloed systems and overriding priorities, gaps in science and policy, modern and traditional, etc., gaps between government and non-governmental actors, gaps between communication systems and platforms. So there are many, many gaps here that have to be systematically addressed. There's also the question of access between developed and developing countries, the level of advancement of Track 2 1.5 systems, which has led to developing countries which do not have such formal systems being left behind. Lobbying as a fine art and not a shameful practice. I mean, we need to look at that. Track 2 1.5 is not inclusive, it's limited to intelligentsia, it's sorted by seniority, it is power adjacent. So how do we open it up? Language, education in terms of literacy, these are all barriers to accessing the Track 2 1.5 or even 1 system. Finally, the lack of agency. There's a lack of official mandate. How do we create that? There's a difficult to move a breakthrough from an unofficial workshop such as this into the policymaker arena. The moderates attend while the hardliners remain disengaged because their extreme points of view are not sort of taken up. Many Track 2 initiatives rely on private funding and can collapse if the funding is taken away, or worse, support the agenda that the funders are doing. How do we correct against this? And of course, as we heard, how do we integrate youth, women, local communities? Easier said than done. I mean, these are token representations. How do we go beyond this? One final point on the role of Track 1.5. This itself has to be developed as a system that creates the bridge between 1 and 2. I don't believe we have done a great job with this, or we are actually receding from it. Formal training given in Track 2 diplomacy, the role of academic curricula in creating the culture of debates, critical thinking, broader commentary, risk-taking when you are saying something that may not be the popular opinion, and how do you finally make this a career option that is rewarding, profitable?
Write down most of them, but I'm happy that we have a lot of support stuff. They take minutes, so I can read it again later, or you can even share it. So this was the last official commenter. So I would invite you already to indicate if you want to speak. Let me just try to give it a bit of a structure. If you need some kind of structure, I think what we could try to distinguish to some extent is, let's say, the level of narrative or development paradigm, the process, and what Nalanda dialogue can play for a role in this kind of process. Topics, issues, most important topics. I think we discussed it already for the last 1.5 days to a large extent. Actors, what are the actors we want to address? So that could be a bit of a structure. Let me just few additional things I wanted to to say. I think also based on some responses here, our scenario thinking, how this discussion, this international debate will evolve is quite fundamental. So to have a good understanding, do we really see all in this room, this debate or this future potential agenda as a universal agenda, or would some or many of you share this view that we might be not able to have a global universal agenda given the geopolitical context we are in? And I think this would be quite relevant for our thinking also how to organize this kind of debate. So in a way, I know when we speak out on something, we might increase the likelihood that this might occur. But I think, at least in my view, there is a real risk with United States and some other countries are supporting this from Latin America, from elsewhere, that we are not going to see it. Yeah? What does it mean? I think we should be able to speak it out. And one other aspect, also triggered by what you were saying about UN, I think UN, and I feel very like-minded with the UN. This is the place to go, and it's not perfect, all this. At the same time, I think looking at some discussions on the core mandate, for example, of United Nations, and if some countries are successful in this regard, development topics will be kicked out to a large extent. What does it mean also for our perception of the United Nations? So this would be also a quite relevant additional discussion. But I do not want to hijack the entire discussion. So we have already one indication for a question or remark or comment. Please, if we have more, yeah. And we start here with your intervention.
Thank you. And to 2 points. One thing is about we need to have a kind of a common development agenda when the post 2030 agenda is expiring. It is about 4 years. We need to think. And I think yesterday we had a discussion. And I think for in this regard, and the ASEAN has come up a kind of mini-scaled or the downscaled SDG goals. That is very relevant. Basically, there is a need for regionalization. All these 70 goals are too complicated and too difficult to measure and report and verify. And so I think probably we need to think about the next generation of the common developmental goals. Having said that, and I think here where this 1.5 or 2 track will help. And I think IRIA is hosting 3 think tank networks. Research Institute Network, IRIN, that is the Energy Research Institute, and the Technology Network. So this brings the kind of agility and the resilience that is needed for the policy making. I tell the one example is that is when Trump 2.0, the Liberation Day tariffs are introduced, governments are shying away how to retaliate. And the thing is, then they formed, IRIA has basically an instrumental, and we formed a geo-economic task force. And the geo-economic task force and most of the policymakers joined in their private capacity. Basically, it is a kind of informal network. We analyzed, we developed the scenarios, how our economies will be affected, and what will be the implications for the US. So this kind of, basically that brings a kind of agility to the decision-making process. And second thing what happened was also, sometimes it unlocked these frozen channels of the communication. When the Myanmar had the coup, and basically all the official channels has been closed. Then CDRI and Cambodia Development Research Institute, another think tank, and then Thailand the Development Research Institute come together. Basically, it opened the channels. Basically, we provided the platforms where the academic institution comes, and we open the communication channels with the Myanmar government. And third one is, and I can say that is the, we also help, mostly the policy makings are happening in the silos. And we help this research institute, this think tank networks, 1.5 track, and help to bring this policy dialogue happen. For example, when EU CBAM was introduced, we don't know how that collectively the region can respond. So we bring the energy ministries and the finance ministries and the climate ministries come together and to have a collective decisions. So this kind of 1.5 track need to be used for developing the next level of common development goals. Second thing is also in the reality, it brings the resilience to the region, and sometimes it acts as a safety valve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Deepak, over to you.
Thank you. I have very limited experience of track 2 diplomacy, but I have some. Something comes from learning, but as an academic, as an analyst, there is a question I want to pose to everyone here. What is track 2 diplomacy? It means different things to different people. And I would like to just pose 4 questions for you with analytical distinctions within each. because very often these endeavors or such initiatives are defeated either because there is no clarity in objectives or because there is a multiplicity of objectives. Now, I have 4 questions. Who initiates the process? Is it governments? Is it citizens and civil society? Is it research institutions? Is it international organizations? And all of them do this. In many ways, where governments initiate it, it's a kind of shadow process. It gets representatives of other segments of society to set out what governments want set out. So I think that is important. The second question is, who is represented in these groups? You know, the conventional view of track to diplomacy may be academia, research, think tanks, but I think in a sense that functions in a vacuum. It really needs to connect with some people from industry or the private sector. It needs to connect with civil society. It needs to connect with parliamentarians who are not governments but are legislators elected by people. It needs to connect with the media because that is one form of articulating voice. Third, what is the domain of this? It's very important to be clear. Is the domain bilateral? Is the domain plurilateral? Is the domain multilateral? Now, Sachin and I have been associated with a citizens' initiative, Track 2 on South Asia. Yeah? And it is a struggle because politics is in command. Yeah? We cannot even get people together from different South Asian countries. Similarly, you know, I've had one experience. I was part of a India-Pakistan dialogue, citizens dialogue. But we really struggled to bring people to talk to each other. So I think that is important. And my last question is, what is the role of this track to diplomacy? Now, what Sachin and I have endeavored to do with many distinguished predecessors in the past is to get open up channels of communication between South Asian countries that don't represent the hostility of governments. Yeah? And it's been a difficult process. So one could be just opening up channels of communication, open doors, open minds. The second could be we wish to be facilitators as, you know, in terms of conversations, in terms of consultations. Third, if you're more ambitious or you make advances, then you could be a catalyst in the process of getting governments together, getting policy practitioners together. And last, you know, is the role that of creating a design, a framework? So I think, you know, forgive me if I'm being pedagogic, but I think it is important for us to recognize what is the purpose of the track to diplomacy we seek to initiate, and can we recognize the importance of the analytical distinctions we made? I think that could be a first step in thinking. So I'm sorry if I've wasted the time of all these wonderful people around the table.
No. Deepak, I think this was wonderful in terms of clarification. What is most important, yeah, and I'm sure Sachin Nicola will later on address it. But it's also up to the group. How do we look at it? What is our wish in this regard? Our hope, yeah. But this is really a very crucial set of questions. Over to my left-hand side. Yeah, please.
I think my own thoughts were similar to what Professor Deepak mentioned. I thought we have to have the end result in mind. So what would be the objective of the dialogue? My own assumption, it is mobilizing thoughts, building an environment in the global scenario the way it is emerging, We have an example of the new international economic order, which we in the Reserve Bank of India have been pursuing for nearly 25 years. We have been saying that the existing international economic order is not very conducive for emerging countries, and therefore IMF and the World Bank have to think about it. Very recently, when we were under the G20, Larry Summers and N.K. Singh from our country had done a very good report on debt sustainability. So my own thought was that given the global scenario right now and given the SDGs and 2030, we need to now start mobilizing thoughts, putting our thoughts together. How do we go about? I would think the need is to sponsor studies, engage academia more intensely, and across the universities, across the countries, we need to identify certain areas, and I have 3 in my mind, need to identify certain areas, if need be, sponsor studies, hold conferences where we are able to engage the academia, influence the policymakers, and then also reach out to the governments in different parts, especially those which we need to influence. Across the countries and across the universities, I think would be very important. And some of the countries and universities which I have in mind obviously are emerging countries. BRICS could be one of them, SAARC could be other, but we would certainly like to, and I would think that engaging countries like the Japanese and Europeans would also help. What are the issues that we really need to flag which are on the back burner and not attracting as much attention as is required? My own thoughts are, given the AI revolution that's going to happen, some of the countries, especially India, is going to be impacted very badly because we are a very young demographic country. So obviously employment is the key issue on which we need to think. The other is of course climate, but which has again been pushed to the back burner in the last 2 years. Trade is still another one. Countries like ours, which have invested a lot in international trade, suddenly find that this international trade, going by any theory, economic theory or political science, is suddenly a bad word. So regionalism is increasing, which could also be a threat. Finally, I think a time has come where some of us have to put our foot down and talk about the implications of a war on climate, on economic growth. Countries like ours, which are chasing growth, Indonesia is chasing growth, the implication of a war, even if the countries are not engaged or not a party to the war, getting impacted, the youth getting impacted. I think these are the 4 areas which we need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh. Over to Professor Malhotra.
Thank you. In fact, there are few things, as very rightly pointed out by Shua, there are 2 important things. One is trust, the other being, in fact, agency. These are the 2 questions on which I would like to slightly concentrate. When we talk of trust, there came a viewpoint that accountability is to be fixed. Now, important question is, when we say accountability is to be fixed, we are perhaps referring to the policy makers. But an important question here is trust within a society and trust between the society. Both are very, very relevant issues, and at this setting, in fact, we need to address all these things. Secondly, starting, Stephen, you made a very, very relevant point, in fact, when you said that every crisis situation could be seen as an opportunity also. I'm sure that world today understands the situation much better than it could have understood in otherwise circumstances. So that's one key point. But starting a discussion and definitely taking opinion from all possible segments of one particular population or across the populations is very, very important. With agency, I would like to say one thing. Giving an agency issue. But assumed agencies is another important issue. I think thus far, the common issue is starting from inaugural to what the Polish friend just said on VMAN, on Nepal, all these issues, they perhaps somewhere reflect that some of the voices, they were never heard, and that is why such kind of, let's say, extreme actions or extreme expressions, they have surfaced over time. That's one very, very important thing, that how much time should we be spending on all these kinds of dialogue, and where should these dialogues be, in fact, taken. And add to that, the track 2 aspect, in fact, this is where the crux of the issue lies. The process, I wanted somebody, in fact, to speak on the change and the mechanism of change, which has not come forth so far. The process of bringing about a change is very, very important. We are all talking about a big change now, but defining that process and meticulously defining that process. We are somewhere, there are voices which are saying, well, we will think about it in 2027. There is time, but this time would also pass. It's a good time that we are making a good beginning. I'm very hopeful that Nalanda has taken this initiative, and this initiative is definitely kept alive and made still more meaningful, so that the voices at different levels are rightly represented, and the voices from the society and across the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. We have a number of more interventions. Let me just indicate the order, how I perceive it. Lily, Veselin, you, and you. Yeah, that would be the order. Yeah. Everybody knows who is meant. Professor Lily.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity to respond. Actually, this is made by Nicholas, but I myself would like to share my learning here. Gradually, I understand why Professor Li Xiaoyun sent me here, because I am not an expert on the South Asian issues. I'm trying to learn while you are discussing, and I'm trying to learn about the Chinese government's position on the northeastern 7 or 8 sisters from the diplomatic perspective to unite it. Or you just mentioned who initiated the process. So it's a long history, which I cannot review it on such an occasion. But from China's perspective, China never recognized the so-called Arunachal Pradesh illegally established by India. The southern part of Xizang is Chinese territory since the ancient times. China has indisputable sovereignty over this area, and the so-called McMahon line, which was made by the British colonizer in 1914. It is illegal and invalid and has never been recognized by the Chinese government. But we still hold that connectivity, economic development, and regional cooperation is very important, and peaceful negotiations are taken as the way to solve it. So actually, yesterday when I was communicating with the distinguished panelists, actually I have never focused or dig into this tough issue. So within just the short time, I'm trying to learn, and I'm thinking of whether we could open our mind on this challenging topic in a short time, because about 20 years ago in 2007, I went to Sri Lanka for a conference where Indian, Pakistan, and Chinese scholars was joining. And I have a lot of questions at that time. And during these 20 years, I have been writing papers. For example, I think China and India should promote our trade and economic cooperation. Even we should co-establish industrial parks. And India should join the Belt and Road Initiative. And I have been doing comparative analysis that's focusing on climate and carbon trading, and also the health, even the traditional medicine cooperation, or traditional medicine governance in each of our country. And according to what I studied just now, for the other 7 sisters, except Arunachal Pradesh, there have been special economic zones established where India could promote the trade and economic development there. But Arunachal Pradesh cannot. They can even not come to China. Their development now is limited. So I'm thinking of, is there some way as a win-win-win instead of lose-lose-lose? I think currently we are faced with a lose-lose-lose scenario. Just now I met the Chinese overseas students, He Yang, from Peking University here studying in Nalanda University. His visa was only given for 3 months, and currently he is actually recognized as an illegal foreigner here in India. The bottleneck was the Ministry of Home Affairs in India cannot issue the visa to him. And there are several other Chinese overseas students in India who is pursue the degrees, the 2-year degrees, faced with the same situation. That's why I was late just now. Since this is a stalemate or deadlock, since we are human beings, our human beings' wisdom sometimes has limit. But I remember that Chairman Deng Xiaoping, who have been proposing the opening up policy in 1978, have said that the China-India border issue is a problem now, but we hope there could be future wisdom of the future leaders to solve it. I don't know whether there could be some creation, just like your Nalanda University net zero campus, that we could, I'm just thinking of any win-win-win solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. I'm just looking at Sachin. Do you want to respond later on? Yeah, okay. Okay. I just consider this option. Veselin, over to you.
I want to follow from Deepak questions, and it's really an excellent, beautifully put framework to think about track 2. And few quick thoughts on that. Track 2 comes because track 1 doesn't work. Simple. So in a way, the governments facing those global challenges in time of globalization cannot produce to the expectations. And it's not like we are pushing governments to accept our opinion. It also works the opposite way. I used to be in a government, and we ask think tanks also for knowledge. We want to see research and analysis and outcomes. So it works both ways. And because governments cannot do it alone, this is why civil society, think tanks, academics, NGOs are very crucial here. Not only governments individually, but also as United Nations. The Secretary General is very much inviting networks to cooperate. And the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, had a special representative on the relationship with the civil society. So it really works both ways, from the governments and from us. And on the issue of the format, it cannot really stay bilateral or trilateral or even regional, exactly because of globalization. A lot of issues are already interweaved into that. So at some point it goes global anyway. It may start bilaterally, but at some point it will go global. Moreover, the challenges cannot even be resolved on the They can start individually and bilaterally, but at some point they will go to the top. And we as academics, we would like to see we can teach students, we can write books and stop there, get our salary and pension and forget about the world. But it's not enough. We would like to go a step further. We want to see how what we study and research and wrote and analyze get somewhere. And this is why it's so important to get the bridge with the policy making. And policymakers need us, remember that. Not only we need them, but they also need us. And for the format and for the topic, the domain will be developed. And I'm sure this group is one of the strongest in India in terms of study of development. And another paradox, Nicola, here is that on one hand, if we see the huge achievement of development, 4 million out of poverty over the last 25 years. On another hand, there is still that bottom billion, as Paul Collier put it. So there is a huge achievement on one hand, which we can just accept and leave it and say we achieved a lot. But because there is still that billion under the $2.5 a day, there is still an enormous achievement comes with enormous still task to do next. And this is what we need to translate into the possible communication and dissemination in all those forums abroad. The development still matters, despite the huge achievements.
Thank you so much, Veselin. Vice Chancellor.
Yeah, I only want to make 2 points. First risk, I think we don't need to dwell much on the definition of what track 2 constitutes, but there are 2 risks. One, the whole track 2 process should not also be the extension mechanism for certain governments. That is one risk. We must save that. Second, I think it is, I may probably seem like disagreeing with Popovsky, but the biggest challenge, not only in the diplomacy, even in the decision making and development policy formulation in each country, is the academia, the research institutions, and think tanks come up with very fantastic solutions, great research results, but there is a big wall between the policy making and political elites and the findings. We talk very loud, we thank ourselves for having great results, we can produce a good report from this dialogue here, but it is very difficult to sort of convince the political class, the political leadership of the ownership. Implementation is a bit distant. Second point I want to make is that the track 2 can only effective when it is either there is urgency of particular issue or mutuality of issue. So we probably need to explore what is urgent to address and what is mutually convenient to work with. That's second. Third, coming back to think tanks, we are very generalizing the definition of think tanks, and we are not being able to distinguish between the INGOs, NGOs, and think tanks. It's very, very dangerous, I would say. The NGOization of development should be different from the real think tank process of exercises. We have heard about Seven Sisters, Nepal is there, but NGOization of development is small token money coming as assistance, and the ultimate purpose is different in many, many places, and it has got serious repercussions of it. So I think, and I also would like to build on what Professor Charan Singh said. I probably would be expecting some another slot of few minutes to talk about how academia can be instrumental in forwarding, taking ahead the track 2 diplomacy. But I think we need to distinguish between the kind of think tanks, NGOs and INGOs, research institutions, and how we can bring in the academic institution. We need to have a deeper thinking about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vice Chancellor. Nitya, over to you.
My comments would be based on, my observations of developments in two international organizations for, I would say, couple of decades or even probably more. Namely, the World Trade Organization, WTO, because I worked substantially on trade policy issues, and also UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And in my observations, I will see certain issues is being written about, discussed in Western academics. And then I would realize this issue is going to come, whether it is WTO or UNFCCC. And we would kind of respond to those issues more as reaction than response. And by that time, more or less, the global understanding and consensus has almost developed. So we are pretty late in responding to those issues. And there is another thing is that the kind of government and academics, the coordination, understanding when I see, I have been in these ministerial conference or COP, kind of meetings, and I have observed that the way they coordinate would not coordinate that much, academics and policy makers. So that is very important. And even if we coordinate, our coordination is more or less very narrowly based. We don't involve broad-based academics because knowledge is not kind of there only in few individuals. And so that is very important. So what we need to do is that and this, when I discuss with some academics in those places, even though they, some of them might have been working at the behest of the government, but very often I realize that they would probably would not have much, perspective going into their understanding from the developing world. So that needs that we develop broader understanding, cooperation among academics of North and academics of South, and also among ourselves, like, Chinese, Africans in many countries, and Latin American. We might have similar kind of issues, yet the cooperation that we have developed are often not South-South, but kind of North and South. So what is required is that in academics, we also need to develop a kind of North-South and South-South, so kind of triangular cooperation. I know Professor Chaturvedi was trying to do that in RIS, and here probably it will be done. But I think what has been done so far is too little. We need to do more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitya. Before we continue with the ambassador, let me just ask Bambang, are you still online? Because I think would be great after we take here the last couple of interventions from the floor, if you could elaborate a bit how you're looking at it. I mean, you were raising a number of important challenges, issues you see from your institute as most important. Maybe you can provide in few minutes a couple of thoughts how you reflect on the discussion we are having here. But before we get back to you, Ambassador, and some more interventions. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Since, like I said, I'm not an academic nor an economist, and I'm no longer in the government, I think I'm brave enough to say what I want to say now. Track 2 diplomacy is actually government-led. So it's people who are the confidants of the leaders who talk to each other what is not spoken in public. So when we say track 2, I think we are limiting ourselves. We talked about like-minded people, we talked about similar interests. We didn't talk about governments that are friendly to each other. I cannot believe what the US representative to the UN said is what is believed or agreed to by the majority of the Americans. I think it's just another way for the US to undermine the UN that it has been doing wherever it suits them. So we should get away from that. And we should catch hold of private individuals, private corporates, intellectuals, and get together and talk about what is going to benefit us and how we are going to benefit each other. Even if governments sign commercial or economic agreements, the people who work on them are the private companies and enterprises. In fact, in the US, the foreign policy is driven mostly by the entrepreneurs, the big corporations. And I mean, it's also true in many countries, but it's the most glaring example. So let's not call it track 2, 2.5, or track 3. And since Nalanda dialogue has started, let Nalanda be the convener. If governments do not agree with what we say and refuse to give us visas, we can go online. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Satish, over to you.
Sorry. One very small point. Earlier I said that we need to have these case studies of large-scale transitions and so on. If you look at the recent case of Indonesia, where within a single day, $80 billion were wiped off the stock market, it's a very instructive occasion because the president had just returned from his very triumphant Davos speech to Jakarta. That was the 24th and 26th. There was almost a concerted attack from many different sides. 3 rating agencies, Morgan Stanley, and I've written about it, I'm happy to share it. But what it shows is that the concept of budgets, the appropriate budget deficit, the fiscal vulnerability, or however it's put, is really a choice between different kinds of expenditures. It's not only about the size of the deficit. And Indonesia's deficit is actually below 3%, the old Maastricht criteria. So we need to rethink some of the discussion and the theory when applied to these large-scale transitions. If the choice that you have is that you are in the world's largest archipelago, which may split apart if you don't have some kind of glue to pull it together, and you have to spend money for that, then so be it. So I think we need to rethink the theory here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a final intervention by my neighbor.
Neighbor here only. I have 2 comments rather than the question. First one to Andre sir, like you have been talking about South-South cooperation, IPSA, BRICS and all. And then I think IPSA or BRICS, they have been working like since the establishment in various sectors like sustainable development, climate change, energy, security, inclusive growth, everything. And I think you have mentioned some of the avoided areas by BRICS or IPSA. So on that issue, I just wanted to have some clarification on that. And second issue, my clarification question is, Dr. Lee and the India-China, which is always like one of the conflict area, and I have been working on India-China relations since many years, then India-China relation issue of Northeast India and all. Then there are certain examples like when I was in Delhi in JNU, one of my friend's friend who was the IFS officer, he applied for Chinese visa, and Chinese government didn't issue the Chinese visa to that particular IFS officer by saying that you are from Arunachal Pradesh, and Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of China, so you don't need to get Chinese visa to come back to your home state like that. And another issue was in 2011, then even this Chinese Google map, they have already included Aksai and this Tawang as an integral part of this thing. Then 2013, when the then Indian Prime Minister visited this thing. So there are certain issues that I don't know. Just my comment. And all.
Yeah. No. We will. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
I'm really happy that I do not need to summarize or something like this, because this is Nicola's job. This is great, because this was such a rich discussion, and I'm really happy that we had some level of disagreement. Nicola was disagreeing with me, and I was saying already, this is what we academics should do. Without disagreement, no progress. One small remark, because I always like to misuse my moderator role, and you probably never ask me again to do it, but track 2 requires trust. I mean, this was your point and also mentioned by others. And trust is also a topic I like, and with some colleagues we even did at some conferences trust labs, and trust is still a very important issue and challenge, no question about it, full stop. At the same time, sometimes, and you also know it from the UN discussions, you do not share basic assumptions. If you know your neighbor is not sharing this view that you should clean, your apartment every week, if basic assumptions are not shared, if the basic assumption, global sustainability is something what we should jointly try to achieve, is not shared, this is not a question of trust. It's fundamental disagreement. So, and what we should do about it needs to be different from if we do not have trust in each other. And that's an additional challenge of the time we are living right now in. With this, I hand over back to Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan, and congratulations for the chair and moderation of this session. So we could say simply we have taken notes, because in fact this session and this segment in particular was not to share definitive ideas, but to put on the table a number of whereabouts, understandings, priorities, etc., about how we may operate in the future this format of Nalanda Development Dialogue. That's the first point. The second point, obviously, there are other arenas to talk about other topics. Here we are talking about development, right? Development policies, development priorities, future of common development goals. There are other arenas where we might want to talk about security and so on. This is not our topic here, right? Clearly, and especially not with the format of Nalanda Development Dialogue. Some commonalities or some ways to have different ideas or disagreements or etc., they should be focusing on the larger umbrella of the need to find out how to respond to what was very clearly put on the table in the past 1.5 days, that we are collectively bumping in a wall when it comes to development. There are risks of development as a whole be sidelined in international or intergovernmental negotiations. There are risks, more than risks, that finance continue to decline for ODA. There are risks that development strategies and the good things in the development cooperation that have been acquired in over 50 years of multilateral diplomacy and multilateralism is being sidelined. There are risks that people get a little bit not so much interested into development and cooperation, but more into competition. And there are risks that also good sources of science, evidence-making, academic think tanks, you name it, cooperation, could dry out because other priorities would be taking center stage. And there would be additional risks that a number of very important societal parameters, such as what to do with the future of agricultural transition, for example, what to do with the future of so-called growth and development models, which in the past 30 years have been largely built upon infrastructure building, urbanization, and so on, could be discontinued without any clear replacement model, right? In that case, it's not just a fragmented world order, as it has become commonplace to say, but we might collectively come a bit short of ways to address such planetary interconnected issues. And there are risks if cooperation dries out, if competition takes center stage and so on, that we are becoming collectively even less able to understand and address those systemic questions that have regularly been pointed out by a variety of speakers. And somehow when it is about the way forward, we need to cope with all those factors, which are imposing on each and every one of us a number of constraints that probably we cannot individually manage. Hence, the need, and I think it was all pre-agreed by having each and one of you coming in, to sit down together, because together we are at least a bit stronger. It gives us additional energy to manage complexity, but also to figure out how to address those issues and have a voice that can be shared with others. Scientific networks, academic networks, government bodies, international agencies, regional organizations, and etc. But I would like, now that is a very bleak picture, right? But I am an eternal optimist. And I would like to draw a bit more of a colorful image. There was Holi festival not long ago with colors and brightness. Let me do that in two ways. The first one, I really wish to insist that under our feet, especially here from Nalanda, there are untapped reservoirs of ways to be creative with addressing challenges. Honestly, it's not the first time in humankind that disagreements, wars, conflicts, power plays have been at play, right? And it would not be the first time that people find solutions through our mindsets, backgrounds, using all sorts of ideas and other civilizational motives to address them. That's the first point. Second point, if we look back in history, not the thousands years history of time frame, but in the past few decades, when there was the conflicts of World War II themselves, right? This is the exact time where the so-called post-World War II institutions, be it about the UN or be it about finance, were coined. And discussions never stopped, really. In 1942, 43, before the Bretton Woods Conference, for example, there were discussions with economists about future production systems, about market organization, about growth measurement, and all sorts of things. So, this is the exact right moment where we need to calm down, continue, and think about how to address those factors of complexities without too much regret for what doesn't work, but using, I'd say, additional leverage to build maybe future macroeconomic consensus, maybe build the future daily moment, whatever. But this, and it was very well described by several of the speakers this morning alone, this sometimes gray area, but predictive, potentially very predictive area of track 2 or track 1.5 diplomacy, relying on think tanks and arenas which are there and which have proven their efficiency. If you allow me one last comment on the comment that our colleague Andre has made, because Andre here has the experience of all sides of discussions and negotiations. it's not a magical formula. So let's avoid turning this track 2 world into a buzzword and a magic formula of solving the all issues. If it is not being done properly, as Andre was referring to, this can be even less interesting than government negotiation, government discussions, or purely academic discussions, because people would feel confined just to repeat some mottos. Whereas I think we can do the exact opposite. But again, it cannot be operated in a completely disordered manner and just by, I want to push my argument, or this is my idea, this is my school of thinking, and no, on the contrary. And this is why some aspects of here in Nalanda, including in yesterday's discussions with the students, which I challenged a little bit, but the way to listen to each other, but also this motto with Sachin is always insisting on, and which has been foundation for this Nalanda International Center for Studies on Development and Sustainability. Let noble thoughts come from all directions. And here there could not be more symbolic way than this round table to do so. So this would be a few ideas to wrap up our conversation. Then it could be deepened into different sectors, segments, finance, and so on. Sachin, one word, if you allow me, in 2 minutes, regarding the publication. This book that, together with the Global Solutions Initiative, with the Asian Development Bank Institute, and a few others, CEEW, we are preparing about the future of Common Development Goals, was exactly designed in anticipation also of the Nalanda Development Dialogue to be able, not now, but towards the end of 2026, early 2027, after we will be publishing some nice small reports and so on of the Nalanda Development Dialogue. We want to be able to continue digging in and consolidating some inputs and ideas, and that would be also a reflection shared on the global stage, electronically, maybe in a paper format, but for sure electronically, about ways to continue addressing this need of building foundations for future common development goals, right? So this moment is a moment. It's a beginning. It's by far not the end. And with that, I would like to thank again all the teams who have been working hard, and the students and the members of the academic community here. And let Sachin maybe share a few words of conclusion or way forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicola. So friends and colleagues, thanks a lot for very stimulating track 2 discussion. And I spent almost 35 years being part of RIS on this very issue of what is track 2 and what is track 1.5. And Ambassador Alta is absolutely right that it is mandated by the respective governments. And I think Andre really captured it, the essence very well when he said that some of the academic forums are more reflective of government statements than academic analysis itself. So I think it's very important that researchers, academics, professors, and faculty members desist from reading out foreign affairs policy statements. We come up with our own analysis. We should enrich our understanding, and we should understand the history, the geography, and also the politics of the region. Some things for academics are good to be left to negotiators and politicians. We are not politicians, and we should not get into that realm at all. We should keep the facts together, and we should strengthen. So I think track 2 session was very stimulating. Congratulations, Stefan, and congratulations, Nicola. Despite of your differences, I really enjoyed the session. It was very good. But friends, we are also coming to the close of Nalanda Development Dialogue. I have huge list of colleagues to thank who have put the notes together for me. So the team led by Kishore and Munir, thanks to both of them. And also, apart from them, the Gen Z in India, please stand up. So Gen Z in India is very different. It is going in the direction that we all have been expecting them to go in. They all have put in lot of hard work in getting these notes together for me, and have also been working as volunteers for this conference. So thank you. Thanks for your hard work, and also for understanding the issues. It's a very difficult task to capture all the sessions and all the points that have emerged in this. We have very limited time, but I would try to bring out the key facets that are important for us to take this Nalanda Development Dialogue to 2027 as we go. What are the issues? And I have tried to capture from the notes that I have got here, plus my own notes, to see the way forward. How 2027 should be designed, what are the ways we can really explore possibilities of adding new themes, adding new partner countries, and also bringing in the global efforts that are required for us to understand our development partnership and development engagement. I think the opening session, as all of you would recall and would agree, was very stimulating. All the three addresses that were there, I think, were absolutely fascinating in terms of understanding and evolving the larger landscape of global development that is coming in, and what is actually a solution summit to see how social measurements and social realities are of great significance. And this chasm is important to be addressed as we go forward. Shamika's emphasis in terms of bringing states like Bihar and Northeast India in the development process, I think is a lesson for many cities across the global south. If we see 12 African countries which we analyzed some time back, in 8 of them, the capital city is the key action point. 78 to 84% of GDP is coming from one city in that country. 8 countries in Africa, which we studied 12 out of the 12. So the urbanization and the pace at which urbanization has happened, the pace at which urbanization has got concentrated in terms of huge emphasis that UN and other development funding agencies have emphasized, we have left multiple entities behind. Not far away in our own neighborhood in Bangladesh, 86% of GDP of Bangladesh comes from Dhaka. So that's the kind of inequality that you create for other people within the country. So that part I think is important by emphasizing on Bihar and Northeastern, she has brought that out. Professor Deepak Nayyar's description of North-South dialogue as dialogue of deaf and South-South dialogue as search of blind, I think is a very apt description in terms of how we identify the agenda forward. But his emphasis on bringing forward the global South consensus, I think, is absolutely important. How we highlight, how we recognize, and how we take that forward, I think, is absolutely important. There are multiple points that I have taken down, but I think at this point suffice to say that this session was extremely action-oriented in terms of what, Nicola, we can identify as actionable point with Kishore and our team here. Number one, set of issues, what new research is required, what should go in pedagogy, and what should be part of publications. I think all the three areas require our attention in terms of Nalanda Development Dialogue's focus on global South consensus. And I'm sure, Kishore, more of our master students and other scholars would be encouraged to focus on contours of global South consensus. And that should be part of 2027 theme next year for MA dissertations, and also for Nalanda debate format, what action point we can bring out. The point that Thomas raised through his donut and what Professor Deepak Nayyar raised in terms of water and planetary limits, I think are important. Thomas' point on multidimensional thinking of new development model, I think, is the crux of the session, which we should address and juxtapose it over UN's multidimensional poverty index. So if we identify such parameters, they can be connected and they can be sort of put together. In session 2 on pathways to sustainable and inclusive development, Tatsushi Sonobe-san's presentation, I think, was extremely interesting in terms of identifying the virtuous cycles and also the participation for economic growth. And that, I think, is important, as Chris also in that same session identified the role that World Bank and other development banks have to play for creating the global public goods, and this emphasis that you laid is important. I think Honorable Vice Chancellor Achyut Wagle's point on orientalization of development debate, I think, is important. And at Nalanda, we are very, very vigorously trying to bring in the idea of civilizational state and the indigenous knowledge system that we need to bring in. In the same session, Lili's presentation on China, India, Brazil, and Indonesia, and the Agenda 2030 is an important point for us to go forward for green development. Shaikat's summary was very important in terms of highlighting on long-term structural transition that Shaikat you emphasized. But in the same session, Andre had this point of focusing on SDG goal 3, 10, and 13, which I think, Andre, is important and probably may be discussed as Jagjit in the same session raised this issue of common development goals, commonality with whom, development for whom, and goals for what purpose. So that, Nicola, I'm sure intersection would definitely answer that question. And Dr. Srinivas' point on local currency settlement, I think, was important contribution in the same session. Dr. Charan Singh's, I think, two very important points that I found extremely relevant, sir, are this de-dollarization point that you raised, but you also rightly reminded us of history as to why euro was introduced. And this, I think, set the context in terms of the whole debate that we are seeing in terms of de-dollarization and rise of digital currencies that I think is extremely important. In the same session, Anbu and Nitya both made very interesting points. Anbu's point on industrial harmony and social connect, I think, was important. His emphasis on sustainability and social equity are extremely important observations. But Nitya, you really added to this debate on development by bringing in case examples of Chile and Costa Rica. Very interesting examples of high well-being without high income. I think this is something on which we have been mentioning for so long in terms of well-being and emphasizing on going beyond GDP as development parameter. So how we create global public goods, which Global Solution Summit has been emphasizing, has to be absorbed from the perspective of what you said, and you gave example of Maldives for low income inequality that is there. Mohanty ji has left, but his points on trade gaps and reducing gap between global south and global north is important. He showed how in high technology goods, actually the graph has crossed exports of global north from global south. So this is something which is extremely interesting, and the phenomenon of global south catching up is largely, at least in high technology goods, is important. This morning, we began with the northeastern states and localization of SDGs in the northeastern area. Jayanto, your moderation and contribution in the debate with Netra was very important. The Northeastern Training Research and Advocacy Foundation, I think, is an important initiative for us to address all farms, as Nicola very rightly reminded us. So we need to see that we discuss development issues and not political issues. Political issues would decelerate the spirit with which academics should come up. And as you would sit with your professor, Li Xiaoyin, he would tell you how important it is for China and India to work together, overcome the differences. The border issues are there among many countries. China and India haven't spoken to each other for first round 28 years, second round 32 years. So we should not push academics into that direction. We should understand the history better. You also chose this platform to raise issue of a Chinese student of my university. I should tell you that you have no business to raise it. And second, there are procedural issues which your student whom you pleaded here in my presence has no business to raise it with you. I want also to tell you that there are certain formalities, and I just asked when you raised this issue here, my registrar, and registrar has informed me, and I would share the details with you. So without understanding facts and history and the dynamics, you should not use this platform for those purposes. So we should avoid that. Now on the idea and very interesting session, which Nicola so brilliantly summarized, on track 2 diplomacy, I think is important. Both Stefan and Professor Bang have done brilliant job in terms of identifying what are the issues in terms of taking that forward. And I was seeing Professor Bang's 7 minutes, Stefan, he used it so productively. It really impressed me in terms of how he could capture multiple issues in terms of how he sees the policy uncertainty and also the deceleration that we see in SDG adoption. And his one sentence, which I found very interesting, geography is now determining the trade destinations, which is so apt. And I think, Stefan, you also did a very good job in 7 minutes by identifying multiple issues, but your emphasis on coalition of like-minded actors, I think, Nicola, is important because we need forces to come together. The point that I'm telling Lily, I think it is important that like-minded individuals should come together irrespective of nationality and irrespective of platforms. They would be the force to reckon with, and our analytical command on specific issues would be further strengthened. And I think what Stefan quoted Larry Diamond on democratic recession, I think is an important quote, Stefan. In the same session, we had Professor Mishra bringing in the issues of scale of transition and quoting success of Indonesia, I think is an important initiative that he mentioned. I think the issue of what we heard from 2 of our Polish speakers, Vasilin and Molgazeta, I think I do not know how the pronunciation is, but definitely I hope it's closer to what is there. Your point in terms of how much we grow and how well we live, I think is the crux of our discussion. This is the crux of the well-being debate which OECD has raised, and also in terms of how the idea of what Dr. Vasilin raised in terms of 1.5 or track 2, but the point in terms of the developmental needs that you emphasized through the framework, I think was important. Andre, good that you reminded us of BRICS academic framework and the forum's agenda, which you rightly said has played an important role in reminding us of not only the government-led influence on academic forum, but also, I do not know if you have been part of it, but at RIS, I was made in charge of the BRICS Civil Forum, which was all the more interesting, in which civil society from BRICS countries were talking about the role, and I'm sure Professor Deepak Nair would never agree in terms of the declaration that BRICS Civil Forum used to bring out. So I think the space, if we ourselves compromise, then I think is a big deterrent in terms of identifying what four questions Professor Nair just now raised: who initiated, who is represented, what domain they work in, and how do we open it up. So that, I think, is an important reminder, and Professor Charan Singh further emphasized in terms of new international economic order to be taken forward by us. Professor Malhotra re-emphasized the points that came up in terms of how we look at the dimensions that are important in terms of what Shubha said, who is accountable, and whose trust we need to bring in. So I think development without trust is not feasible. Nalanda Development Dialogue should work on the contours of how do we bring in trust. And that part, I think, would be important for communication systems, which Shubha mentioned, but Professor Malhotra also emphasized. So I think this is largely the points that that I could capture in terms of the notes that I have got, but also in terms of my own writings. So I thank all of you for your participation, and once again we thank my team which has worked hard, so a big clap for all of them. The administration, the academics, the students, and the effort to put the development debate last evening, those who were there for the dinner, and also the travel arrangements that have been made. Nalanda is not on the main travel route, so it's a bit off the mark. It's not that you land in India and you are in Nalanda. That's not the case. But I'm thankful to each one of you who took this pain of traveling all the way to Nalanda. I wish you all the very best for your return travel, and hope to continue this dialogue with our team and with our partners who are going to work together with us. So thank you, and I wish you a safe journey back home.
And I was advised that we need to proceed with the formal felicitations before we wrap up.
So please.
Can you also tell what is the plan for that? Inaugural is done, Netra is done. Others are not done.
So please.
No, you take it. Yes, sir.
What is the name? Ah, putain, ils font chier, là. So we will proceed with the felicitations for the speakers of today. Am I right?
Today in SSS plenary session. Second half. Facilitating our speakers, where Stefan has gone, but
Stefan, you are requested for the felicitations. So we will first do this table. And Professor Sonobe? And Shubha? And Christian Kastrop?
That's me?
Yes. and Dr. Charan Singh. And Dr. Anbumo